Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, Diane James has been elected the new leader of UKIP with almost half the votes. In her first speech as leader, she called on the government to invoke Article 50, the formal process for Britain to start leaving the European Union by Christmas. But she has a job on her hands to unite a warring party, which today saw another high-profile defection to the Conservatives. Our political correspondent Michael Crick is in Bournemouth.
Well, today was meant to be a day of celebrating the Brexit vote with speeches from leaders old and new. Instead, it was dominated by defections and infighting, particularly with UKIP in Wales, where there are rival leaders, including the former Tory MP, Neil Hamilton. UKIP claim they won the referendum, yet this conference follows weeks of internal backbiting. And now the defection to the Tories of two senior figures, including a very close friend of Nigel Farage. Mr Farage, what do you make of Alexandra Phillips defecting? Bad day for you, isn't it?
I think she was treated quite badly.
By whom?
It's a bit. I think some of the elements in UKIP Wales need a bit of dealing with, but you know, that's life.
Neil Hamilton.
Well, he wasn't necessarily my first choice, was he?
I mean, it's not a good day. Farage had sent Alex Phillips to Wales during the general election after mysteriously removing her as head of media.
Turkey ranks 149th.
But this year she was still entrusted to present UKIP TV broadcasts. Today, though, she quit.
The atmosphere within the party is hugely toxic. There are so many different factions, it's like a spirograph of Venn diagrams.
Conference this morning was dominated by the old leader's triumphal farewell speech, a time for UKIP to crow.
We did it! We got our country back!
It wasn't Farage at his classic best, but he did try to give his party new purpose over Brexit.
We can be very proud of the fact that we won the war, but we now must win the peace. And the only mechanism to put pressure on the government to keep the debate live and to make sure that those 17.4 million people get what they voted for is for UKIP to be healthy and for UKIP to be strong.
After lunch, a new leader was announced.
With 8,451 votes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, Diane James.
A member of the European Parliament, James was backed by most of the party bigwigs.
What's your reaction? How do you feel about it?
But she refused during this contest to do any debates with her opponents. Today, she issued this challenge to Labour and Tories.
And if you're watching TV this afternoon, you'll be watching the opposition party in waiting. And Mrs May, from one grammar school girl to another, stop the faff, stop the fudge, and the farce, get on with it. Invoke Article 50.
And within minutes we learned she'd axed all four of her leadership opponents from the conference schedule for later today. And tomorrow, Neil Hamilton, UKIP leader in the Welsh Assembly.
How did you get to hear about this?
I didn't. I was just handed a leaflet by somebody from UKIP in Wales.
So that's how you were removed from the agenda, is by handing you a leaflet?
Well, that's how I found out I was removed from the agenda.
Diane James insists it's the leader's right to remove speakers as they wish.
It's my prerogative and I chose to change the programme.
Okay. A purge?
No, not a purge. Michael...
Nigel Farage, of course, had a big reputation for purges, and many in this party doubt whether Diane James can be anything like as effective as he was.
Well, as UKIP ushered in a new leader and faced a defection to the Conservatives, and Labour seemed poised to re-elect Jeremy Corbyn, the former Chancellor, George Osborne, made his first big public appearance since his departure from government. He said, unlike David Cameron, that he's going to stay in Parliament and fight for what he called the liberal mainstream majority. But where is the centre now in British politics? With me now, the Times columnist Philip Collins, the Labour and Momentum activist Barbara and Toomey, and from the UKIP conference in Bournemouth, Neil Hamilton, who is, of course, also a former Conservative. Neil Hamilton, you've been biffed from the conference programme. Are you the first purge victim of Diane James?
Well, I've only been taken off the conference agenda. I've certainly not been purged. I'm the leader of the UKIP group in the Assembly, elected by my colleagues. The problem with Nathan Gill is that he wasn't and he can't cope with that. I don't know whether today's decision has something to do with this. But there it is, life goes on.
Are you a fan of Diane James?
I always got on with her very well. I've been in the party 10 years longer than she has. I canvassed for her in the Eastleigh by-election in 2012. I've always had very cordial relations in the past.
Why doesn't she like you then?
Well, I haven't been told that she doesn't like me. She may just feel that the conference is a bit too exciting and it needs a sedative, so she's brought Nathan Gill on instead.
OK, well, stay there for a second, because Philip Collins, I mean, what we see is UKIP and the Conservatives now sort of, merging almost in policy terms over Europe and grammar schools. We see Labour, virtually about to re-elect Jeremy Corbyn. What is the liberal mainstream majority? What is this centre ground? Does it exist anymore?
Yeah, it always exists. I'm not sure it'd be right to call it the liberal centre ground. I think that might be misleading. But the Conservative Party would reject the way you characterise them. I mean, they may well be veering to the right, but they don't mean to do so. Theresa May's speech on social mobility was not an attempt to shift to the right, even if that's the effect. And I think that there is a sort of there's a sort of sweet spot in politics, which is if you are thought to be the party which is the party of economic competence, and a party which at the same time looks as though you care about social justice, then you're going to win. And the party which is closest to that formula will always win. At the moment, the Conservative Party, even though they're quite a long way from there, are still the closest to it. And that's why 15 months ago, David Cameron won an overall majority. So it's not changed that much. I mean, George Osborne was the strategist who delivered an overall majority only 15 months ago.
Barbara and Toomey, this sort of centre ground isn't where you and the Labour Party membership want to be anymore, is it?
I mean, I don't think that any one party can claim the centre ground. I mean, from the data from 2015, only a third of Conservative voters will class themselves as social liberal, and 60% of Labour voters will. So I disagree that there's a shift for a Conservative or the UKIP off the centre. I think the issue is loads of people's living standards have been driven back, and that's the most thing they care about. 0-hours contracts on the rise, people don't have secure employment. You've seen the cuts of benefits for some of the most vulnerable in the country, and that's the reason why we've seen hundreds and thousands of people who've never been involved in politics before join the Labour Party. So in many cases, I think the Labour Party is winning people in the centre because people are fed up on sitting on the fence and stuff. They actually want action.
Well, unfortunately, there's just no evidence that this is the case. I mean, the Labour Party is not converting people who voted Conservative the last election. It really isn't. It's confirming its core vote. It simply isn't making any progress. It hasn't made any progress at all since the last election. And in order to do so, you have to win over people who previously voted Conservative.
But why have both parties, the Labour and the Conservative parties, the two biggest parties, got rid of their centrist leadership in Cameron and the new Labour leadership?
Well, for the Conservative Party, it's obviously a huge convulsion over the European Union, which complicates the fact that it's not liberal, because obviously 52% of the country voted to leave the European Union. But nevertheless, Theresa May would not describe herself as taking the Conservative Party to the right.
Neil Hamilton, I mean, you chose to sort of leave the more centrist Conservative Party and go to UKIP politics. I mean, why do you feel that that's where you can win? Is the centre ground just kind of a nonsense now?
Well, I think these terms left, right and centre don't really mean anything anymore. Politics is much more fractured than it was when I started out 50-odd years ago. I've been fighting the battle over the EU since 1967, and I've seen the Conservative Party change many times in between. UKIP now is able to bridge the class divide in a way that the Tories can't. The biggest votes for Brexit in Wales were in Labour heartland seats like Merthyr and Ebbw Vale. Labour have abandoned the territory of their traditional supporters, and UKIP is going to pitch very heavily for the votes of these traditional Labour voters who have been abandoned by their own party.
But, I mean, do you think, you know, when Diane James says you're going to be the official opposition and you've got one MP, you're going to be waiting a long time, aren't you?
Yeah, but in the Welsh Assembly, you know, we've got 6 members out of 60 altogether. Labour doesn't have a majority on its own. We have the balance of power in our hands, and we're playing a major role inside the Assembly. The Assembly will get more powers as a result of Brexit and the Wales Bill currently going through Parliament, including tax-raising powers. You know, we are already an opposition party in Wales. We're not in waiting. We're actually out there battling day in and day out and stamping our presence on the face of politics in Wales.
Barbara and Toomey, I mean, there is a similarity almost between what you hear from the right and from the Labour Party membership now, which is that this sort of, the mainstream is like a dirty word to you, isn't it?
I don't think it's a dirty word. I think that there's the narrative, right? There's what people think is really going on in politics, and there's what's actually going on. And then there's the third thing, which is people's lived experience and what they're being told is the problem. And when people from poor communities are being told that migrants are the reason why they don't have jobs or access to the NHS, and that's something that they believe, then that becomes part of the narrative. So actually, Labour is doing a long-term strategy, a long-term task of getting people to understand what's happening with their reality, what's happening to their lives right now, what's happening to their job prospects, what's happening to their education. That's the long-term strategy we are taking.
And Phil, you think neither of these people are going to win until they rediscover the centre?
There's no chance whatsoever of winning. I mean, the idea that UKIP will be the opposition is a fantasy, and the idea that Labour can go from the position that Jeremy Corbyn strikes to victory is absolutely ludicrous.
No, it's not.
It's completely preposterous. I mean, the first rule of politics is can you count? And there just aren't enough people in Britain who agree with you. You might be right.
Well, we're going to win them over, but you missed the whole point. We have a long time to the general election. I did not wake up one day and became elected. There were things that I went through to become that, and there were things that were explained to me, and that's the long-term strategy. We want to explain to people that actually Jeremy Corbyn, as the Prime Minister, is going to raise living standards, and that's what we're doing. We've managed to do very well so far.
We will all wait and watch.
Oh, it will go very well.
Thank you all very much indeed for coming in.
The UK Independence Party has a new leader. But with Brexit secured and former leader Nigel Farage apparently intending to take a more conventional approach to resignation than he did last time, or the time before that, does it have a future? Diane James, the party's MEP for South East England, today emerged victorious after a leadership contest that was, for the most part, as devoid of the usual rancour as it was of household names. So who is she? And what's to become of a party that has achieved its sole raison d'etre? David Grossman spent the day at the party conference in Bournemouth.
It is an absolute pleasure to announce, with 8,451 votes, the leader of the UK Independence Party, Diane James.
So UKIP has a new leader. As Nigel Farage supposedly bowed out for the 3rd time, his replacement this time had a message for the Prime Minister.
From one grammar school girl to another, stop the faff, stop the fudge, and the farce. Get on with it. Invoke Article 50.
That clearly went down well in the hall, but of course it's those outside who matter, a fact Diane James was reminded of repeatedly during her first press conference as leader.
You are replacing one of the 3, 4, 5 best-known faces in British politics.
Yeah.
And for a lot of voters, this might be the first time they have become aware of Diane James.
Yeah.
How would you introduce yourself to the British people?
A fresh face, a fresh approach, but give me a chance.
But who are you as a person?
Exactly what you see in front of you. An MEP, been an MEP for 2 years, Justice and Home Affairs spokesperson for UKIP, held Theresa May to account for 2 years.
What she neglected to mention there is that she's also a pretty ruthless political operator. No sooner had Diane James been elected than she removed Neil Hamilton from the list of speakers on tomorrow's agenda. The former Conservative minister is blamed by many for sowing disunity within UKIP. On tomorrow's revised agenda, he's been replaced with a coffee break.
What's going on?
Yes, well, I suppose that, well, I don't know really. It's a change of regime, and I just don't understand what's happening. Nobody has actually informed me officially.
What's your reaction to her election as the new leader of UKIP?
Well, I was prepared to work with her, and
as part of the team leadership that UKIP now needs to make further progress, I was prepared to play my part.
You say were, I was.
Yeah, I still am, but you know, we are a political party, not a fringe group or a personality cult.
One of those Mr Hamilton came into conflict with was Alexandra Phillips. To add to the drama, today she defected to the Conservatives, calling UKIP dysfunctional.
It's going to be hard for them to differentiate themselves from the May government, because what she's doing at the moment, I think, are wonderful policies that are likely to appeal to a huge amount of the UKIP base.
How dysfunctional has the party been, do you think, over the last few years?
Horrifically. I mean, you couldn't make it up. I've never known anything like it. You know, half of these individuals you wouldn't want babysitting your dog, let alone running for office, let alone running a political party. And it's a shame, because actually what I've seen over the course of a year is some of the greatest talent in the party, the future promise of the party, essentially being excised from the party.
Do you think you were kidding, Mr. Cameron?
After all those last-minute agenda changes, you'll be glad to know the UKIP choir, with their rendition of Who Do You Think You Are Kidding, Mr. Cameron, will be appearing in tomorrow's event. The fact that it's still David Cameron in their song suggests a party that may be struggling to come to terms with the new post-Brexit referendum political reality. Indeed, what is the role of UKIP now that Britain has voted to leave the EU? One academic believes that UKIP can appeal beyond Brexit.
There are also broader issues around inequality, disadvantage, left-behind groups, particularly white working-class communities that feel as though they're just not getting a say and not getting heard in modern Britain. That movement, if you like, you can see in many other European countries, very successful populist movements, Five Star in Italy, Danish People's Party. And so I think there is room for UKIP or a party like UKIP, but it's going to have to resolve its internal problems. Lack of unity, no money, dwindling membership. These are big problems.
There is no gratitude and little loyalty in politics today. Having delivered on its signature policy, some in UKIP might have been expecting to be riding high right now, but no party has a right to exist, let alone thrive.
David Grossman reporting. So, where do UKIP voters want the party to go next? Secunda Kamani has been to West Bromwich, where the party enjoys strong support.
West Bromwich West was one of over 100 seats where UKIP came second in last year's general election, making inroads into traditional Labour heartland. But with Brexit now a reality, not a campaign slogan, what next for UKIP? We paid the local branch's social club a visit, and it wasn't your average pub.
So this is our establishment. We're going to have a pub this side, or a licence this side to operate as a pub, and also on this side we have the bead shop.
And this is also a UKIP social club?
It's also a UKIP social club. We also
so do they prefer the beads or they prefer the pub?
Well, they prefer both, kind of thing. The people from all walks of life come into either.
That's why you've got all the purple beads then?
Yeah, no, there's not too many purple beads in here, actually.
Ray Crawford is a man of many beads and many hats. Amongst other things, he's a UKIP council candidate and wants the party to position itself in the middle of British politics.
The working class now of people that are earning $15,000 a year to $80,000 a year, and they're all struggling, every one of those people. Nobody's looking after them. Labor's looking after the people that don't earn the $15,000, and then as far as it goes on the other side of things, the Tory party's looking for the people that earn more than $80,000. So there's a massive great gap in the middle there.
And do you think that without Nigel Farage you can have that same kind of popular appeal ever again?
I'm still laying there at night time dreaming of the fact that he's going to turn around tomorrow and say, I'm sorry, I resigned, I'm coming back.
Voters here in the Black Country firmly backed Brexit, but many UKIPers still doubt it will actually be delivered.
To be honest, until we're actually out of Europe, I don't believe we're going to be out of Europe. Until I see it on paper and it's there, like, we ain't going to get out of Europe, are we?
So you voted UKIP last time, are you going to vote for them again?
Yes.
Why?
Well, similar reason, they haven't done the job yet. We haven't come out of Europe. We're still in.
But the government says they're going to take us out of Europe.
Oh, that's what it says, but have they done it? It's done over 2 years.
You don't trust them?
No.
So is the party just a one-trick pony? So now that the UK is leaving the EU, what's the point of UKIP?
Well, UKIP's got a real relevant point because basically they're going to keep the government to the candle, if you like. make sure that we don't get Brexit light. I think UKIP has served a fantastic purpose so far, but that's not the end of them. Not the end of them by a long, long way. And it's been fantastic today that we've got Diane James, and it's what, 48% she got of the vote, so she's got a clear mandate.
The disenchantment many UKIP voters have with mainstream politics remains, and that may lead many of them to stick with the party. But UKIP will have to define itself on more than just Brexit to broaden its appeal.
Sekunda Kamani reporting there from West Bromwich. Mark Reckless was a Conservative MP. He defected from them to UKIP 2 years ago and is now the party's economic spokesman. He also sits in the Welsh Assembly and joins us now from Cardiff. Mark, let's start in Wales because you have a new leader nationally. You have an old leader locally, Neil Hamilton. They already appear to be at loggerheads. Does someone like you now have to pick a side?
Well, I pick UKIP's side, and I try and work with people across the party, and we have to build a team, we have to reach out, and we really need to make use of all the talent within the party. I think it's fantastic Diane has won this contest. I wish it had been a wider contest with people like Stephen Wolfe and Suzanne Evans.
She's biffed your leader off tomorrow's speaking roster and replaced him with a coffee break. So you can call all you please for unity. She doesn't appear to be minded to deliver it, does she?
And there's been a little bit of tension between Neil Hamilton and Nathan Gill, but Diane's come in as a new leader, and the conference has been prepared, I think, with an acting chairman, and been proposals as to what that should showcase. But ultimately, Diane's just been elected as a leader, and if she wants to have a particular programme or a particular focus tomorrow, I think that's absolutely her right, and I support her.
But for people who perhaps don't follow these matters as closely as they should, Nathan Gill was the former leader of UKIP in the Welsh Assembly, who now sits as an independent after falling out with Neil Hamilton, but remains a UKIP MEP.
Yes, Nathan Gill led us into the election where we got seven members of the Welsh Assembly elected, where we've broken into a domestic parliament and hold the balance of power.
Can you tell us a bit more about Diane James? You saw my colleague David Grossman trying to put a little flesh on the bones, but apart from a sort of really detail that we could have found on her business card, he wasn't very successful. Do you know her well?
I don't know well. I know Diane. I've got a good, I think, professional relationship with her. The thing I'd emphasise most about Diane is, like me, she's fought a by-election. It was some time before I fought the Roxton and Strood by-election, and she came extraordinarily close to winning Eastleigh off actually a very strong local Lib Dem campaign, and she understands how to appeal to voters in the middle, how to expand our
again,
appeal.
Mark, you're giving a CV. I'm looking for something perhaps a little weightier, something about her that we don't already know.
Well, I think the point I was giving, I think probably does answer that, because what she does is she engages with voters. She goes out and actually understands what people want, speaks to people, reflects on what they say. She's got a very business-like approach.
But surely you're not
actually
suggesting...
puts forward, I think, a very, very attractive and considered image of actually wanting to change things to benefit people in this country. And she really showed that in Eastleigh, where she was very nearly elected as a member of Parliament.
Of course, there is one candidate who's done even better and got elected, Douglas Carswell. She hasn't spoken to him for 3 months. Do you know why?
I'm not sure exactly why or when they last spoke.
She's not reaching out to people like UKIP's only MP?
No, I think Douglas and Diane, I think they've got a working relationship. I've certainly been at meetings where they've worked very constructively together, and I think she said one of her early priorities will be to meet with Douglas and discuss how best she as leader works with our UKIP parliamentary party, and I know Douglas is very keen to make that relationship work.
Your former PR a few moments ago, the party's former PR, not your personal PR, of course, describes UKIP as being sort of roughly half of them was so dysfunctional she wouldn't let them babysit her dog. Does that tally with what you recognise, bearing in mind that she's been involved in the party longer than you have?
I think that's a little unfair. I mean, Alex has done some work for me and occasionally put me forward to appear on programmes like this. I mean, I wish Alex well, and far be it from me to criticise someone for choosing to move from one party to another.
Indeed, albeit in the opposite direction. But this notion of dysfunction, I mean, some of the names and personalities of the party you joined, Suzanne Evans, I think, wrote the manifesto that you fought on in the last election. She's been essentially eased out of proceedings. Stephen Wolfe, for reasons that remain a little opaque, couldn't stand at all. Many felt that he was Mr Farage's preferred candidate, and we're left once again with this question mark hanging over Diane James, who you tell us wants to change things and reaches out to engage people. I don't imagine there's a politician in the country who wouldn't seek to fit that description. Can you give an idea of what it is she seeks to change? What will be at the top of her to-do list, Mark?
I think a test of that is you mentioned Suzanne Evans and Stephen Wolfe. I'd like to see Diane make sure both of them play leading roles in the party. We had a superb manifesto that Suzanne wrote. I developed a lot of those ideas in a Welsh context for the manifesto that we won 7 Assembly members with here. And what Diane has to do is she has to explain in her own words and with her own passion what our party is for. We've succeeded in getting out of the European Union, at least winning that vote, and I do think we will leave the European Union.
Very briefly, because we're going to run out of time. Can you tell me what you think the party is for now that the I bit of UKIP has essentially been achieved?
I think it's to get back our democracy. I was against the EU because I'm a Democrat, not because I'm a nationalist. And we don't want just power back from Brussels to Britain, but actually then getting that power down to local communities and giving people back that sense that they're in charge of their own destiny and have influence over their own lives. Just your programme last night, people are paying 2.5 times the price of electricity for 50 years because these corporate interests decide what's going to happen for them. We have to actually look to the ordinary people in this country and try and make sure people have the opportunity of a better life, not having costs and costs piled on them by a political elite and cartel that needs to be shaken up. And it's UKIP that speaks for the ordinary person and not for those corporate elites to try and make this a better country.
But not necessarily speaking with one voice just yet. Mark Reckless, thank you very much indeed.